you for being with us. So can you please make sure that you have your mic turned off, and then after, if you want to have ask a question or say something, you can either use raise your hand with the participant box, or you can just type in the chat and let me know. So I'm still hearing some of you right now. So if you can turn off your mic, Jaume Zunu can still hear you, I think. But anyway, so that's the first rule. And the second rule, of course, there is happy. Can you hear me? Because someone turned me off. It's okay? Good. And of course, for those who prefer to have the French version of what I'm saying, je peux le faire aussi en français, mais I'm gonna do it in English. There is like a live translation, and I really would like to thank Adli for doing this amazing job. So I'm Hervé Berville, Hervé Berville in the English version. I'm a member of the French Parliament, and I have the pleasure to introduce you today's virtual meeting on the topic of debt management in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. So we are here about an hour and a half, including 30 minutes for discussion and Q&A. But before we start, I really would like to thank the World Bank for organizing this virtual meeting, as well as my honorable British colleague, Liam Byrne, who is the chair of the World Bank Parliamentary Network. I think for all of us as a member of the parliament and where we are in different continents, it's very important for us to get the opportunity to have this discussion with multilateral institutions like the World Bank at the time the world is facing one of the worst, if not the worst, economic crisis of our modern time, and of course, a sanitary and health crisis. It is even more important because, as we all know, multilateralism and international coordination and cooperation are going through hard times. And this is also the role of national parliament, of course, to get more engaged in multilateral affairs and negotiation to make sure that we have impact and to make sure that we have real cooperation. So today we are going to talk about, of course, the impact of the crisis with a lot of brilliant speakers, member of really important NGOs and vice president of the World Bank, and you, of course, my dear colleague. We'll talk about the bank action for recovery and more specifically the perspective of debt management. Indeed, as we all know, public and private debt have raised at record high level in some development countries, which poses a systematic threat to their own development, but also to the international economy as well, and of course also in Europe when we saw a rise of debt over the last 10 years. I think we can all agree that the World Bank, there is someone who didn't turn off his mic. Anyway, continue. Please turn off the mic and to speak after during the Q&A session. We can all agree that the World Bank and the IMF has been very responsive and quick to address liquidity shortage and the emerging world soon after the pandemic started, and supporting the debt suspension service initiative. Quite interestingly, it has been quite a huge debate in France when President Macron here in France called for a debt release. It has been really discussed in our national parliament, and it will be one of really big debate about the future of what we want to do also with the World Bank and the IMF. As you know, the issue of debt management is absolutely essential, not only because it raised some question for credit country and institution, ultimately, and you know it well, this is taxpayer money, but most of all because debt management is directly correlated to budget capacity and the ability to generate long-term growth, inclusive long-term growth, and public spending in our countries. It also raised the issue of transparency and the mobilization of domestic fiscal resources. So as we all know, the debt issue and debt management issue is a real political issue, and I think we all agree that it's one of our key priority. So at the heart of our discussion today, we will be able to understand how the World Bank is going to articulate the two sides of the coin, the coin, sorry, debt management and the budget capacity for growth, and also to better understand what type of action of policy recommendation we, as a member of different parliament, we can take at home to support this overall work. So now I will leave the floor to the Vice President, Sela Pazaba-Sioglu, sorry for my English, it will be even worse in French, who is the Vice President for Equitable Growth, Finance and Institution. Once again, thank you very much for being here, for taking your precious time to discuss the very important matter. And now I will leave the floor to the Vice President, Sela, and then after we'll have Aki, Vice President for Development Finance at the World Bank, then Kevin Watkins, the Chief Executive of Save the Children, and then the Honorable Liam Byrne, MP and Chair of the Parliament Network. And then we will have country perspective from MPs, Sabina Chege, Cornelius Muitwa, Chandana Kudzard, and then we'll have this really important time of discussion Q&A. So once again, thank you very much. Please turn off your mic, raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and comme on dit en français, démarrons cette conversation intéressante. Merci.
Merci. Thank you very much, Hervé. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great opportunity to discuss what we can do to overcome this huge debt challenge that we are facing, which of course, unfortunately, has been magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's a real pleasure for me to speak today with you because you are really a key part of the solution. The crisis has made your role even more important and, of course, I'm sure, very challenging. You approve national budgets, you can shape legislation to strengthen your country's debt management capacity, and you really play a key role in terms of transparency and accountability. So I really look forward to the discussion and also learning from you how we can support yourselves. So this is really an incredible time because many countries are across the globe fighting with the pandemic, both in terms of lives and livelihoods, and your oversight role is crucial, that the funds that are allocated are really allocated wisely and productively to make sure that they go to the dealing with the lives and livelihoods that are at stake in this crisis. So I'm going to talk about 4 key issues today. First, the recent buildup of debt before the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, the implications of the pandemic for the global economy. Third, what we are doing as the World Bank in response to the health, social, and economic effects of the crisis. And finally, the principles of transparency, which are really critical for us and will guide us to return to a path of sustainable debt and productive investment, because this is really what is crucial for sustainable and inclusive growth. So first, and we published a report just before COVID-19 pandemic, actually, where we call the global waves of debt causes and consequences. And here we mentioned that the total debt in emerging market and developing countries have reached an all-time high of about $55 trillion. And this is really incredible. This is the 4th global wave of debt, and it's actually the highest. And it looks like a tsunami if you look at the cover of the book. The debt surged in emerging markets and developing economies, reached an all-time high of $55 trillion. In low-income countries, it fell very steeply during 2000 and 2010 with also all the initiatives. But now it's back to 67% of GDP, 268 billion in 2018, and it's going to even increase because of COVID. And in dollar terms, this number is nearly double the level of 2010. So this was really where we were before the crisis. Of course, debt is a good thing because many countries need debt to be able to reach the sustainable development goals. There are huge investment needs in developing countries, and therefore it is important that we use debt, but we use debt wisely. And I always like saying there's good debt, there's bad debt, and there's ugly debt. And the key is how to make sure that we have growth enhancing debt because that's really critical for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals and inclusive and sustainable growth. So of course, then we have, unfortunately, the COVID. In early June, we published our Global Economics Prospects report. We call it GEP. This is our biannual flagship report on the state of the global economy. Our analysis shows that global economy will see its deepest recession since the Second World War. It is expected to reduce per capita incomes across the board and significantly, and tip 70 to 100 million people, additional people, into extreme poverty. And these numbers could go up if the pandemic is not controlled. So this is a very sobering outlook. Severe recessions previously were associated with persistent output losses in developing economies, and low levels of capacity use and uncertainty deter investment and lead to a legacy of obsolete capacity. So we have been seeing unemployment, and if this is long period of unemployment, that this causes a loss of skills, liquidity problems turn into solvency problems, becomes a vicious cycle as weaker growth prospects discourage investment. The current global recession also comes with two features that increase the risk of lasting damage to potential output in many emerging market and developing economies, and that is the higher likelihood of a financial crisis, because corporate balance sheets, sovereign balance sheets, they're all going to be stressed, and of course the severe terms of trade shock that we see, especially in commodity exporting countries. So on top of this, we have a huge level of uncertainty. 3 months ago, we didn't think we would be here. I don't know what is waiting for us in 3 months' time, and I don't think anyone really knows. So that's why we mobilized an unprecedented response. The World Bank Group will provide $160 billion of financing to developing economies over the next 15 months, including $50 billion of that total on grant and highly concessional terms. We have financed, and our staff are implementing COVID-19 programs in over 100 developing countries, and Aki will tell you more about this in a few minutes. I'm going to talk now about why we are caring so much about debt and debt transparency related issues, because this is really a key element of the international community's response. In April, the World Bank Development Committee and the G20 finance ministers endorsed the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, we call it the DSSI, in response to a call on official bilateral creditors by the bank and the IMF to grant debt service suspension to the poorest countries, the IDA countries, to help them manage the severe impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And we have been supporting the implementation of this initiative by coordinating the development of expenditure monitoring systems. This is really critical because the aim of the DSSI is that beneficiaries direct these resources that they, instead of paying interest servicing debt, that they use these resources towards spending to mitigate health, economic, and social impact of the COVID-19 crisis, especially for the most vulnerable groups. So the DSSI aims to benefit up to 73 International Development Association and UN least developed countries by suspending debt service payments from May through December 2020. Yesterday, there was a big conference, G20 Paris conference, where there was a lot of call for actually extending DSSI behind this period, and my 7 minutes are up, so I'm going to wrap up quickly so I give everyone else a chance to speak. And as of today, we have about 40 countries which account for 75% of debt service that is due between now and December. I just want to end by saying transparency is really critical. We have created a website. You can all access it. It has information about country by country, who has access, who has asked for this initiative, what are the fiscal space that is generated. And we also want to use this opportunity to show that, that there is much more transparency in terms of debt and investment, because this is going to be critical. We are providing technical assistance. We have many tools like debt management, performance assessments, and so on. And this is really critical to build the capacity in countries so that we can address these issues. So I want to end by saying COVID-19 has been a big, huge shock to the global economy, but it is very important to use every crisis as an opportunity as well, and use this to do things that were politically impossible before. And that, of course, depends very much on yourselves. And we really would like to support all of our countries by making sure that we can restore good capital flows to developing economies in the form of foreign direct investment and good flows. And for this, we will all be working with you together so that we can emerge from this crisis sooner and stronger, soonest and stronger than before. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sela. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, for this really interesting and also quite exhaustive overview of what the World Bank is doing. And I totally agree with the fact that also in each crisis there is an opportunity. I don't know if we have like a colleague from Greece, but I think in Greek the term kairos, crisis, is also the term of opportunity, and at each we need to seize it and make sure also in our own power as a member of the national parliament, we change things, and we challenge also the executive branch and the government to make sure that we increase and we make sure that our children have a better life. Now I will leave the floor to Mr. Aki Nisho, Vice President for Development Finance and the World Bank Group. He has the floor for a little bit more than 7 minutes, because we all did a little bit more than when you had. Okay, Aki, it's your.
Merci, Hervé, for this very kind invitation. I'm really honored to be here. I've been to several of your countries, and I've met with some of your parliamentarian colleagues. I feel very much part of this community, and I am very privileged to be here with you today. I'm going to ask my slides to be put up on the screen, and I think that's coming up now. I would like to build on Jada's remarks and focus on 3 specific areas. First, the World Bank's response to COVID-19. Second, our support to IDA countries. And third, our new debt policy. Next slide, please. So as Jada mentioned, the COVID-19 crisis has been a very major shock to the world economic system. And it has really caused the countries, the poor countries, to get into a sudden high-speed reverse gear.
Aki, I can't hear you anymore. Is it the case for?
Okay, sorry. I think I accidentally.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. It's better with your voice.
Okay,
Merci.
good. Okay, good. Okay, so yes, sorry about that. The COVID-19 crisis has had a sudden high-speed reverse gear effect on the countries, and you can see there we're talking about the IDA countries. These are the 76 poorest countries around the world, so the impact on them have been very negative. This has been the sharpest decline in growth in generations, as Jayla mentioned. It's on your left hand of the screen. And also with the poverty rate rising for the first time in more than 20 years. And you can see there on the right-hand graph that things can get much worse. Children, women, and people living in fragile countries and also in the informal sector are those who are suffering the most. The pandemic is still escalating and impacts are global. And the crisis is hitting the poorest and the most vulnerable people across the globe. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay. So the World Bank's response in recent months has demonstrated scale, speed, and selectivity. And as Jayla mentioned, we are providing $160 billion in financing to developing countries by June 2021. And that includes $50 billion on grant and highly concessional credit terms from IDA, that stands for International Development Association. And that money goes to the 76 poorest countries. The World Bank Group is mounting an exceptional crisis response targeted in 4 areas that you see on the screen. First, we are focused on saving lives by helping client countries implement emergency health operations. This means strengthening health facilities, ensuring that enough frontline health workers are in place, and helping the necessary medical supplies and equipment get through despite the added pressures on supply chains and trade flows. It also means support for public health information campaigns so that they have wide reach and effectively target the most at-risk groups. The second square, the second box, we are helping countries protect the poorest and the most vulnerable by expanding the reach of social protection, both through new programs in response to the pandemic and a massive scale up of existing programs. In Africa, for example, 80% of workers are in the informal sector, meaning not just that their jobs are at risk, but that they're outside the reach of the most traditional cash transfers and other social protection programs. The third box, we are working to save jobs and business. Due to the impact of COVID-19, 4 out of 5 people in the global workforce of 3.3 billion are currently affected fully or partially by workplace closures. In the last fourth box, we are building a more resilient recovery. Even as we help countries address immediate needs, we are looking at how we can support policy reforms to facilitate faster, more resilient, and more equitable growth when the health crisis subsides. Next slide, please. Um, the support to either countries. Now, this brings us to the second topic I wanted to cover today, which is to support to either countries. As Jayla mentioned, debt relief is a key element of international community's response, thereby freeing up fiscal space to respond to countries' COVID-19 needs. And the World Bank is playing a key role in coordinating the COVID-19 debt service suspension initiative. For our part of helping respond to COVID-19, we are supporting either countries with what they need in crisis, access to large amounts of financial support on highly concessional or grant terms, or what we call fresh positive flows. I already cited the 50 billion directed to either countries in low-cost financing with no interest and with long grace periods and maturities. But let me also highlight that this includes close to 10 billion US dollars in grants. More than half of active IDA countries already receive all or half of the IDA resources on grant terms. IDA countries will receive $11 in new commitment for every dollar they repay in debt service. They pay in debt service during the next 12 months. This is our way of boosting support for our client countries. This is crucial to ensure that either countries have access to affordable fiscal space and boost their ability to respond to the crisis without adding to debt vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. We have heard calls for the World Bank to participate in the DSSI directly by suspending our debt service, but a thorough assessment of the risks has convinced management, our board, that this is not really in the best interest of our clients, the poorest countries. For a relatively small short-term benefit, it would significantly risk our ability to continue to provide the kind of support our clients need over many years. We provide these positive net transfers in solidarity with creditors who cannot do so, and who are better placed to provide support through a suspension of debt service. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to touch on the new debt policy I mentioned, which is the Sustainable Development Finance Policy, or SDFP. And this was agreed on during the 19th IDA replenishment over the course of last year. And it consists of two pillars. One is the Debt Sustainability Enhancement Program, which you see on your left. This is based very much on what we call PPAs, performance and policy actions. These are specific actions designed to achieve greater debt sustainability. And each country will identify the PPAs and discuss with the World Bank and move forward on that basis. On the right-hand side, you see the program of creditor outreach, because we need to have a stronger, more closely aligned collaboration with other creditors to support those countries in need of borrowing. Next slide, please. So the SDFP is being launched at a time when IDA countries face enormous pressures, and that will require these countries to finance additional expenditures to meet emergency needs that could worsen their debt vulnerabilities. So the policy is more timely than ever. Just to recap, IDA's highly concessional resources, combined with its established practice of providing grants to countries most vulnerable to debt distress, is a critical component of the international response to the crisis. This, combined with the COVID-19 Debt Service Suspension Initiative, or DSSI, will do much to safeguard the lives and livelihoods of millions of the most vulnerable people. Thank you very much for your partnership, and I look forward to our discussion. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, dear Aki. Now, because we really, I'm not sure we're running late, but I think we're not.
Merci beaucoup. J'allais dire que nous étions un peu en retard, mais je ne sais pas si c'est en fait.
Really interesting slide. So just to reassure everyone, the World Bank will send you the slide. You agree, Aki? It will be possible to get the slide, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Okay. So do not write everything that was written on the slide. You will have them. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Kevin Watkins, who is the chief executive of the NGO Save the Children. Kevin, you have the floor.
Hervé, thank you so much for the introduction. And I wanted to say, actually, it's really wonderful to be in this meeting, because I think one thing that maybe COVID has taught us more than anything is that we share risks and vulnerabilities in common. And it's only by coming together through institutions like the World Bank that we can combat the shared risk that COVID has presented us with. And I also wanted to thank you, Hervé, for mentioning children in your last comment, because I am here as a representative of an organization that works with children. And of course, children actually haven't figured very prominently in the discussion about COVID, because most of the threats have been suffered by adults, and in particular, elderly adults. But the reality is that it is children, the current generation of children, who will carry the deepest scars from this crisis. We're already seeing increases in child malnutrition. We've got very clear evidence of child mortality rates, which have been going down very rapidly, starting to move in the wrong direction. We have a real concern in Save the Children, which we're about to publish a report on, actually, that COVID is a public health crisis, but it's about to become the greatest education emergency we have ever faced as an international community, as over 1 billion children start going back to schools at a time when education budgets are probably being cut. So this is an enormous crisis, as you said, for our children across all of our countries, and especially in the poorest countries. And it's actually in that context that the debt debate is so important. Chayla had a very nice phrase where she said, there's good debt, there's bad debt, and there's ugly debt. And of course, sometimes good debt can go bad and bad debt can go very ugly. And we're seeing a lot of bad debt go very ugly right now. And I think we really need to ground this discussion in a recognition of the fact that when we talk about debt, you know, these are not numbers on a balance sheet. This is about children who are in school or out of school. It's about children who get immunized or who don't get immunized. It's about real risks facing incredibly vulnerable people. I've actually got, because I've recently written something on debt, I went and looked at a speech by President Nyerere from 1986, which he gave in the City of London. And of course, Tanzania at that time had a very severe debt problem, as many of you will know. And he asked a great question to the creditor community. He said, do you want me to starve my citizens to pay your debts? And at the moment, the 73 countries that are covered by the DSSI initiative that Chayla and Aki refer to, half of them are spending more repaying their creditors than they're spending on the health of their citizens. And I think on any measure of accounting, that is not defensible. So we have a serious problem, and Chayla's already outlined the scale of the problem. The problem is partly the accumulation of debt in the decade leading up to COVID. It's partly that more and more of the debt was owed to creditors for whom there is no debt relief framework, and in particular private commercial creditors and Chinese official creditors. These are two categories of debt that are really critical, I think, in understanding the problem. Now, in the past, it's taken 10 to 15 years to resolve major debt problems when they arise. You know, many of you will remember in the 80s, we had the Baker Plan, which didn't work for a decade, and then we had the Brady Plan. We had all sorts of initiatives on Africa that didn't work, and then we had HIPC and the multilateral initiative, which did work. It took a decade. We do not have a decade to solve the problem that we're dealing with right now. And the problem, as I see it, is that we have one group of creditors, official bilateral creditors, who have stepped up to the plate, who have signaled a willingness to suspend debt repayments for a 6-month period, possibly longer. The problem is that bilateral official creditors don't account for most of the repayments. They account for something like 6 billion in repayments. Private creditors, banks, sovereign bond holders, commodity traders account for about 12 billion, and Chinese credit agencies account for 7 or 8 billion. Now, unless we have private commercial creditor participation in this initiative, it will fail. And I think we should just be honest about this. The same applies to Chinese official creditor agency participation. So I would encourage parliamentarians everywhere to really make the case for full participation in this initiative. I think Aki was right in terms of it shouldn't include either, because that would damage the net position of the countries involved. But we have to have private commercial creditor participation. Very last point I want to make, Hervé, if I may, is often I notice when I speak to the public about debt, and many of you are politicians, so you speak to the public in a much better way than I can. But when you speak to the public about debt, their eyes will often glaze over because it feels like a very boring, non-human subject. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to make this issue a human issue. And I believe we should be making the case for converting the debt liabilities that are held by governments for the DSSI country, to convert those debt liabilities into investment assets, into human capital assets. There is no better way of doing that than investing in children, investing in their nutrition, investing in their health, and investing in their education. So let's take this bad debt, this ugly debt, this unsustainable debt, and convert it into opportunities for children. I think if we come together behind that initiative, we can achieve great results. Thank you, Hervé.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and you speak very well, so don't worry, you could be a politician, I assure you. And thank very much for, we know that the work, the amazing work that Save the Children is doing all across the world, so thank you very much also, because we know in some places your work is more than crucial, is vital for a lot of disadvantaged people. And you mentioned maybe two things, generation and as we as politicians, and that's our goal, it should be, I like this phrase of Jean-T Bembeng, who is like a Nobel Prize, who's saying like our role is not to prepare the next election, but prepare and work for the next generation, something like this. And I think that's the role. And you said that the debt issue was something probably technical, and it should be something of a human issue. It's to be something human issue, but also moral issue, economic issue, and that's for me something really political. That's why I'm really happy to be here with you and have this really interesting session. So without any transition, I will leave the floor to my honorable colleague Liam Byrne, the chairman of this really interesting network. Liam, you have your word. And just for people writing, I saw the representative of the Parliament of the Republic of Tajikistan. Yes, we'll give you the floor, but we just continue with the sequence, with what we had agreed on, and then you have the floor for discussion, for question, for comments, and for giving your input. So just be a little bit patient. It's coming. We still have like some really interesting insight from people, and then after it will be an open discussion. Liam, it's your turn.
Okay, thanks so much. It's great to see you again, and good afternoon, everybody from here in the House of Commons in London. And it's a real pleasure to follow, I thought, a presentation and some remarks of real clarity, passion and force from Kevin. Let me just try and add three thoughts to the conversation, and I'm going to include a few challenges for our colleagues in the World Bank and IMF as well, because I think their help with some of the politics is going to be quite important over the next year or two. Debt is a political issue. My experience is that voters are not switched off by questions of debt. They are very alive to questions of debt. And I say that as a former finance minister who lost an election back in 2010 because we were not trusted with our plan for debt consolidation here in the United Kingdom. So I think the challenges around debt and debt consolidation will be amongst the definitional questions that many of us as parliamentarians will have to navigate in the developed world and in the developing world around the world for the next decade. And our skill in getting those, in winning elections around these issues will define how successful we are. We used to say back in London in 2010 that we knew what to do, we just didn't know how to get re-elected once we had done it. So our political skill in navigating some of these questions will be really tested, I think, over the years to come. The second point I wanted to make is that the challenges that we confront with COVID and in the aftermath of COVID will not be challenges that are simply about getting the world economy back on its feet. As we know, in politics, crises never arrive alone. They tend to come with all sorts of other crises all at the same time. And there are three significant further crises that are going to come pretty quickly over the next year or two. So the first is obviously the transitions that we have all got to make as we deliver on our obligations under the Paris Climate Change Agreements. Most of us are now confronting economies where automation is accelerating, and that is carrying with it enormous risks to jobs. So if COVID wasn't bad enough for the world of work, the rise of automation will affect something like 1.2 billion jobs around the world. And then it's pretty clear to most of us that we're now in a period of deglobalization. It would appear that I think relationships between the United States and China are going to continue to deteriorate. The outlook for resolution of disputes at the World Trade Organization is not clear. Politically, in the aftermath of this crisis, many of us will be under pressure to begin reshoring supply chains to buy local and make local. And so the rise of temperature, the rise of technology, the rise of trade wars will all create additional pressures on public budgets as we try and navigate just transitions for the people that we serve through this crisis. And we will be doing that at a time of very, very high levels of debt. We all went into this crisis with very high levels of debt. We're going to emerge from it with even higher levels of debt. Now, what that will mean is that we will need to skillfully navigate some of the issues that Kevin and others have talked about. And so finding ways of consolidating debt that is held by the private sector and indeed by Chinese creditors into new arrangements and underpinning that with different kinds of debt guarantees for the years to come, I think will be absolutely essential to sustaining low interest rates that will be mission critical for at least the decade ahead. If interest rates begin to rise, the fiscal risk that all of us confront, you know, here in the UK, we will confront an enormous risk if interest rates begin to rise. So we have got to find ways of pooling and underpinning this with new guarantees. That is going to require us to think much more creatively about tax. And I want to just really underline this point, because this is the third point I want to make, and it's where we will need some leadership from both World Bank and IMF in understanding three basic sets of reforms: what I've called a reform around cheating, a reform around carbon, and reform around capital. So unless we find new ways of tackling tax fraud and tax avoidance internationally, then we are leaving trillions of dollars of assets untaxed. And we just can't afford to do that over the years to come. So there have been some good international processes led by the OECD and others, but we've got to be far more creative and assertive around how we tackle international tax avoidance and how we stop doing trade deals unless there are clear arrangements for taxing the gains of trade that are currently going to some of the wealthiest individuals and organizations on the earth. Second, the debate about wealth tax will need to accelerate. So there has been some good work published on this, again by OECD and others. We've just started a big commission here in London on the future of wealth taxes. People who own assets and capital tend to do very well in environments of low interest rates. And therefore, owners of capital and assets are going to do very well over the next few years. We have to therefore find ways of effectively taxing wealth in ways that help us strengthen the tax bases of countries around the world. And then third, of course, we need to step up our work on international cooperation around carbon taxes too. Ultimately, if we are to deliver a recovery that does indeed build back better, that does indeed accelerate our path towards a net zero carbon world, then now is the time, not just to think about investments that we need to make to decarbonize our economies, but also new taxes that help incentivize the phasing out of fossil fuels and behavior that is bad for the environment. So that is a plea to my colleagues at the World Bank and the IMF for a new agenda around that policy work. Ultimately, we cannot separate questions around tax from questions around debt recovery, debt consolidation, and restructuring debt so that it is actually manageable for countries that need that help. So Hervé, I will stop there and hand the floor back to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Liam. So now thank you very much, and I'll bounce back of something you said, really interesting. But now I really want to give the floor to our dear colleagues. First, Sabina from Kenya, then Shandana from Pakistan, and then Cornelius from Zambia. They're going to give us their insight, their view, their country perspective. Each of you have 5 minutes, so I'll give the floor to Sabina first. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and hi to you all. I want to thank you for this opportunity. As you correctly put it, I'm Sabina Chege. I chair the Health Committee at the National Assembly of Kenya. Mine is going to be very brief. First, it's to thank World Bank for really coming out on time to our country, and we received a lot of support. From the previous presentation, I can confirm that we have gone through support that has helped our people when the crisis came. Of course, nobody was prepared for this. We were able to receive some funding that we have been able to reach out, especially to the frontline, the health workers. The issue of COVID came to my country, and there was the issue of the PPEs that they were not even available, and they came in very expensive. And so part of the funding that we received from the World Bank was for transforming the health system in Kenya, where we procured the PPEs, the reagents, and were able to support our frontline workers. I'd also say then we have also moved on to the community support, where we've been doing the community, the social support. We have been looking at the most vulnerable, though the amount has been little, but at least we have managed to support a few families here and there. We have also started a program on the youth support, and especially in the slum areas where the high rates of unemployment is in our country, especially in our urban centers. When we go to the cessation, people are not able to move out of the capital city, where a lot of people depend on the capital city. And so when they could not move, and of course when they're not working, they could not be able to access to work, the government came in, and through the funding, were able to support especially the young people.
It's frozen. Sabina?
Them some.
I'm the only one who's, I think there is like a kind of a connection. It's okay. We can.
Okay.
Okay, it's okay.
Thank you very much. And say that the crisis came, there are also opportunities where we have been able to build and buy Kenya. When the issues of the PPEs came in and we didn't have enough, we went back to our local manufacturers, and I would be happy to report that it is for several people in Kenya. And so this has also been an opportunity for us to look at the areas where we've been doing a lot of importation and to see what we can be able to do as a country. And so the crisis came also with a few opportunities. But looking forward, as somebody mentioned about children, we have a very big challenge because we closed down our schools. The day before yesterday, the Minister of Education announced that the schools will be reopened next year. For the children who are going through the local system, and especially our rural children, the rural areas, they're not able to access even to digital education. The ones who are following the IGC and other curriculum, they're able to do online, and they're able to access to education, but the rural areas are mostly affected. And this has come up also with some challenges, like the teenage pregnancies that has come up. And so it is a challenging moment for the government, and especially now to talk to the parents to be able to contain their children, to be able to protect them. And the teenage pregnancies numbers have come up. And this is one of the challenges that we are facing right now. And as a legislature, as I go to the ground and as I talk to the parents, we are trying to make sure that even these girls, the ones who have gotten pregnant, they're not married off, so that by the time we open the schools next year, we'll be able to have them going back to school. At the same time, improving our health sectors, our health is devolved, and so the county governments are the ones who are really in charge of a lot of the biggest percentage of health in Kenya. But the national government and through also the funding from World Bank, we have been able to, at least every county is prepared for COVID. And so we have improved our health centers. We have also trained the community health workers who come in handy. Because as COVID came in, people are not able to also access to good healthcare. Majority of them were also afraid to actually access or to go to hospitals. And so with the non-communicable diseases and going up, we have also hired community health workers so that they can be able to go to the villages and assist our people. So it's a very challenging time, especially for the health sector, for the education sector, for the children, and a lot of families cannot put food on their table. Government coming in and trying to do social support, but this is not enough. But fast forward, and I think the big question is a legislature I'm asking myself is where COVID leave us as a nation. How do we then cushion our people, and especially the small, the SMEs, how do we come up with a program that can be able to sustain them? On Tuesday, the president opened part of the cessation, and now people are able to move in from the capital center and out. But then again, the numbers, even as today, the numbers of COVID positive patients are going up. So the spike might be by the end of this month. And so challenges on the whether we will have enough spaces in our hospitals, whether we will be fully prepared when the numbers now get to the highest level, because now the numbers are rising every day. But at the same time, when this COVID goes, where will it leave our country? Where will it leave the business people? The number of unemployment has been high, but this time COVID has made it very high. So we need to actually discuss and do a participation. You know, most of the times we see donor money coming in when we get as the legislatures, when we are doing the budgets. But how the money was negotiated, the priority, what was put in as a priority, sometimes we as the legislatures are left behind. My plea and my request is that as negotiations are going on, we need to wider consultation. We need a clear and separate reporting on the use of external resources, the implementation of donor-supported projects to allow for effective oversight as members of the legislature or the member of parliament. And we also need clarity on the support being provided, whether it's a loan or a grant, including the terms and conditions that's accompanied, so that as a nation and as legislatures, as members of parliament, when we sit in parliament, we can be able to make decisions. But unfortunately, we normally know about the money when it's already signed, it's already in the country. And when we get to the budget time, and when we're doing maybe supplementary budgets, that's when we'll know there's this money that came in, and this is what money was already allocated for. And our role becomes very minimal. We can only sit and observe and maybe oversight and see whether what was the intention would be done. Somebody talked about transparency, it's key. I think there was a big uproar with the funding for World Bank when the Ministry of Health in Kenya reported on the hospitality amount that was around 4 million. And of course, at that time, there were not even enough PPEs, and the public really misunderstood that bit of hospitality of 4 million Kenya shillings being given to the ministry, and we had other challenging matters. So it is always important that we have that kind of a clear direction given to us earlier, so that we are able to either add some thoughts and also participate in how this money is shared across the board. I know a lot of World Bank money that came didn't just come to the health. I'm the chair of health, so I only know about health. I went to other departments. And the question is, what are our priorities now? And with all these many debts that are coming, where will that leave our country? Then are we negotiating on terms of payment? And not only World Bank, our country is one of the countries that has also heavily borrowed from China. And these conversations need to start now, not tomorrow, on how do we, how are we going to be able to repay these debts? And are we going to be given a chance or some period where we don't pay, but we first take care of the emergencies before we start paying back? I want to end there. Of course, our tax, we reduced the VAT from 16 to 14%. So even the taxes that are being collected in Kenya are also low. We also removed taxation on a few items so that we can be able to sustain what the common person or the common man is using. So that means also a challenge in the government in their collection of the money that they had budgeted for. And so I thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully that we can have much more of this discussion so that we can have a way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sabina, dear colleagues. Now I'll give the floor for 5 minutes to Chandana from Pakistan, and she's also the chairperson of the Commonwealth Women. Chandana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Hervé. That's a very kind introduction indeed. Pakistan was luckily elected as the chair of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians last year in Kampala. And part of what I do, apart from being a member of the National Assembly, the Federal Parliament of Pakistan, we're also trying to figure out ways, at least before the corona pandemic, to figure out in a newly automated world, how would financial rules, e-commerce, and lack of financial inclusion for women entrepreneurs in particular impact the Commonwealth economies. With the arrival of the pandemic, my attention became a little bit more Pakistan focused. A number of my colleagues here may know that we are one of the few countries that Bloomberg had declared as high-risk countries for debt default as early as August 2017. Our government, Prime Minister Imran Khan's government, came into vogue. We were elected in July 2018. And then we took oath somewhere in August 2018. And we have inherited probably our nation's highest, both internal and external debt. The external debt is close to 108 billion US dollars, and the internal debt being more or less the same. Our economy at the time that we inherited it back in August 2018 was overheated, i.e. our exports were a mere 22 billion US dollars. Our imports were close to 64 billion US dollars, and we had the highest current account as well as trade deficit in history. Naturally, if Moody's and other watchdogs will rate you as one of the 10 most likely countries to default, you're not going to get very far. And you have an economy which is being run on consumer-led growth as well as debt-led growth without any increase in either industry, commerce, or jobs, then it's a recipe ripe for disaster. Again, some of my friends may recall that Pakistan was at that time finishing up its 21st loan from the IMF for restructuring the economy. However, at that time, we were not very successful in doing that, partially because we injected 3 times the amount that we took, nearly 4 times the amount that we borrowed from the IMF for structural reform. Nearly 24 billion US dollars were injected into our economy to keep the dollar value artificially low, and thus we increased our imports. Part of that may have gone for bringing in machinery for the Belt and Road Initiative, part of which Pakistan's territory falls into something called the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. However, upon closer inspection, it turns out that those imports were not capital good imports, but they were mostly for brick and mortar constructions, bridges, roads, motorways. And that is excellent. Trade usually flourishes along routes where you have infrastructure. That is one side of the coin. Now, with the arrival of the pandemic, at least in Pakistan, we've had our first set of meetings, both in Parliament and with the Prime Minister, as early as 15th January 2020, because our Prime Minister, even that early, pointed out that our biggest fear is economic fallout. Because at that time, the Wuhan experience was already in front of us. China is one of our biggest trading partners after EU and United States and the Gulf area. Our concern was that this would add to our economic woes. 76% of our GDP goes to external and internal debt servicing, and that's a huge amount. After the 76%, we give, and it's interesting that we don't have that 76% of the GDP left because we've already given 46% of that to our federating units. So we start off our national annual budget with minus 700 billion Pakistani rupees. Now, if you put that into pandemic context, what does that spell? We were one of the first countries that advocated smart lockdown. Our Prime Minister went global in April 2020, requesting G20 nations as well as many other international organizations, IMF, World Bank too. And this was a call made by many other countries at the same time, but he was pioneering that at the time, that we should suspend all debt repayments, both the principal and the interest for this particular 1 year. Of course, at the time, nobody knew how bad things would get. That we were predicting, at that time, it was between, the prediction for a global economic crunch was between 3 to 7 trillion US dollars, and now we're talking about 9 trillion US dollars. So with those predictions, those are the kind of requests we made. In Pakistan, our budget, the current budget, we presented on the we passed it on 29th of June, just a couple of weeks ago. And what are the sort of mitigating measures we've used? I guess now that I've spelled out the problem background, i.e. we were in a terrible condition even before the pandemic has onset. Let me explain some of the things we've done to try to see what we can do. As I said, we had a liquidity crunch well before the pandemic, and although we were, as we call it, in a stabilizing condition, Moody's changed our ratings from negative to stable. Some other organizations, including IMF, said our outlook was stable and positive, and the kind of hard decisions that we had to take in the first 2 years of our government, we did that. We needed to ensure that we were able to stabilize an overheated economy.
Sorry, I think, sorry. Dear colleague Alassani, I think you need to turn off your mic. I think it's you, because we hear some background. Yeah, thank you. Go on. And you still have 2 minutes.
I will finish in 2 minutes.
Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So anyways.
Alassani, please turn off your mic, please. Thank you.
We're getting background music. Okay. Yeah. So now what is happening is that that budget has been passed and we've gotten debt relief from the G20 as well, from Paris Club. We have reported that we're going to do borrow 3 trillion rupees, which is about $18.1 billion from commercial banks in Pakistan, not central bank borrowing. And what we're going to do, it's going to be in the form of 3-month to 20-year treasury and sovereign bonds. That will take care of one chunk of what we need to do, raise the money as well as pay the debt. The second thing we're going to do, we'll be borrowing nearly $11.9 billion to retire mature domestic debts. We've already allocated money in that for that in the budget. Also, we are distributing nearly $17.6 billion to our federating units, with the hope being that commerce and trade, the international part of it is tiny, simply because of the low export orders. The good news is our medical equipment manufacturing is on the rise, so PPEs, the protective equipment for doctors and pharmaceuticals and public servants, police, masks, medication. In Pakistan, we have a good pharmaceutical sector and textiles, so we've been exporting that. So while our orders for, let's say, regular textile products is down, but for medical equipment is up. So now it's important also to point out that we also have to meet revenue targets from the IMF, because we are under another 3-year loan tranche that we've taken from the IMF. So we also have to meet certain restructuring conditions. Now, when you combine that with the debt portion, you look at how we're going to raise the money. We've also restarted open up our agriculture and our construction sector. This is one of the Pakistan's first budgets where there are no new taxes. So that means although raising revenues through taxes might be hard, we're looking at non-tax revenue, and we're looking at the form coming from, because Pakistan's largest amount of workers in the formal economy and informal economy are either employed by agriculture or the industrial sector. Now, that we hope will just keep us afloat. And the only positive news I can report on that production side is that Pakistan is the only country from whom the IMF has revised its growth rate. We were projected to be -4 for 2021. Now they have revised the rate and taken us to -2. We're hoping that comes into a positive. And the reason they're saying that is because for the first time, Pakistan has slashed all import tariffs.
30 seconds, sorry, because really.
I'll end here. Sorry. So what is the main story here? Pakistan has taken one approach to debt servicing. Yes, we've approached the donors. Yes, we've approached multilateral institutions. But we've also done a very aspiring budget, and some people are not very happy with that. But I think under the conditions, aspirations and ambition can only take us far. It doesn't take us behind. Finally, we've assured that business will start running. It's important to keep our doctors safe, our hospitals are not overcrowded, but we have started going back to business, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague Shandana. I think, I don't know, the people for the World Bank, it seems like the French translation is not working anymore. So if you can do something to make sure it's still working, or it's working again, it would be great. So now the final panelist is the Honorable Cornelius Mitwa from Zambia, member of the Public Account Committee. And I'll ask you, sorry, it's on you, dear Cornelius, make sure that you stick to your 5 minutes, because I really want to make sure that we have time for question to the Vice President, and then also comment and other thing from our colleagues. So 5 minutes, you have the floor, and we listen to you, Zambia. Thanks. Cornelius? Can you hear me? Cornelius? So we don't see you. Your camera is off.
On ne voit pas, la caméra. Cornelius, la caméra n'est pas activée.
Can someone maybe from the World Bank can call Cornelius?
Je demande à quelqu'un de la Banque mondiale, éventuellement, qui pourrait intervenir pour aider Cornelius à identifier le problème.
Cornelius une première fois, Cornelius une seconde fois, Cornelius une troisième fois. I consider Cornelius is left.
I can get you now.
Ah, great. Oh, right
très bien, très bien. C'était à point nommé. 5 minutes, Monsieur Cornelius. Je vous remercie de cette possibilité.
Reunion with my colleagues. We met in Washington. Of you, I can see it is great to learn from the distinguished panelists and the strong sentiments that have been given on this platform. Indeed, a good learning platform for me as a member of Parliament. I've picked some ideas that I hope to use in the discourse of my debate in the House in respect of the subject matter. I will be oscillating around the views to do with the following 3 issues. Number 1, the policies and practices are needed to strengthen a country's public finance and debt management capacity. A country like Zambia, a developing country. Secondly, the most effective use of the World Bank's 160 billion in financing made available over the next 15 months to mitigate the effects of the crisis and build back better. And thirdly, how policymakers and development partners can work together to rebuild stronger, more resilient economic institutions. Now, if you are getting me, and I can proceed, number 1, for a country like Zambia, which is a developing country, which is
I think we lost, it's not I think, we lost you, dear colleague. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's a photo of Cornelius right now. If someone maybe from the World Bank can call Cornelius and see with him if he can have a more stabilized connection. Okay. Well, I'll wait maybe like 30 seconds. And if he's not back, I will open the discussion if you all agree. I think like people nodding. Okay. 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 So I'll start the discussion. So thank you very much, guys. So we'll start by a question. So let's. So when I call you name, open your mic.
Je vais vous appeler par nom. Je vais vous demander d'ouvrir votre micro. Et si vous avez, par exemple, des réflexions portant sur votre pays, je vous prie de bien vouloir être concis. Je suis désolé car l'horloge tourne et nous avons accusé un retard. Et c'est de ma faute, en fait, parce qu'au départ, je n'étais pas très précis avec la maîtrise du temps. Alors, nous allons commencer avec notre collègue de Tadjikistan. Et Njenga Njendi, je suis désolé si j'ai mal prononcé le nom. Ensuite, notre collègue Jean-Pierre Doug Gaka du Gabon. Ensuite, Alassani du Togo.
So we'll start by Tajikistan.
Nous allons commencer donc avec le participant de Tadjikistan.
Okay. Tajikistan, you have the floor.
À vous la parole.
Thank you very much. So I will be interpreting for your benefit, dear
Merci, dit quelqu'un dans la salle. Je vais interpréter pour les participants. Bonjour, bon après-midi.
colleagues, ladies and gentlemen.
Хотел поблагодарить организаторов сегодняшнего виртуального заседания.
First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to the organizers of this virtual meeting.
D'abord, je remercie les organisateurs de cette séance virtuelle.
Для всех нас периода.
Thank you for providing this opportunity to me during such challenging time for all of us.
Всем хорошо известно, что пандемия COVID-19 является чрезвычайным положением для всех стран мира.
Well, you are aware of the fact that COVID-19 pandemic
Она создала очень много проблем для всех экономик мира.
Has created huge challenges and problems for the global economy and for all economies of the nations of the world.
Распространение пандемии, дефицит государственного бюджета резко увеличится, и данный фактор усложнит ситуацию бюджета.
So the budgetary deficit has increased dramatically, which has complicated the challenge.
Правительство Таджикистана в рамках сотрудничества с партнерами по развитию придает максимальные усилия по предотвращению и устранению этого вирусного заболевания, а также сохранению макроэкономических показателей страны.
So basically, we, as the government of Tajikistan, in cooperation with the parliament,
Donc, le gouvernement de Tadjikistan, en coopération avec le Parlement, nous avons travaillé en collaboration avec les partenaires de développement et nous souhaitons maintenir les indicateurs de croissance macroéconomique, donc faire ce peu.
По итогам переговоров и консолидации государственного бюджета был привлечен льготный кредит из МВФ для бюджетной поддержки в размере $189,5 миллиона США.
So the IMF has kindly provided
Le FMI a donné le soutien budgétaire sous forme de financement concessionnel de 189 millions.
Было выделено сумма $11,3 миллиона из средств Международного агентства развития.
So the World Bank has also signed the financing agreement with the government of Tajikistan in the amount of 11.3 million from the IDA funds.
Да, касательно чрезвычайного проекта по борьбе с COVID-19 в Таджикистане.
So this was the emergency project aimed to tackle the issue of COVID-19 situation in Tajikistan.
Да. А также Азиатский банк развития выделил $50 миллионов США в качестве гранта для бюджетной поддержки.
Also, the Asian Development Bank has provided the grant in the amount of 50 million USD as a budgetary support.
Республика Таджикистан тесно сотрудничает с МВФ и всеми партнерами по развитию для улучшения управления государственным долгом, в том числе по разработке среднесрочной стратегии управления государственным долгом и других программных документов, предусмотренных законодательством страны.
So the Republic of Tajikistan closely cooperates with IMF, but also with the other development partners in the area of sustainable debt management. So we do have the midterm sustainable debt management document being developed, and we work intensely to be able to take control of this crisis situation.
Например, для отсрочки кредитных обязательств и снижения нагрузки на государственный бюджет на основе заявления министров финансов и руководителей центральных банков стран членов G20 направлены специально подготовленные официальные письма соответствующим партнерам по развитию.
So we have drafted the official letters to the development partners in order to be part of this suspension, the debt servicing suspension initiative. So the Minister of Finance has authorized those official letters to be given to the G20 countries, and we are hoping to be granted that.
В настоящее время совместно с Министерством иностранных дел и нашими посольствами за рубежом идет процесс разработки механизма отсрочки и подписания соответствующих соглашений сторон для проведения необходимых процедур.
So at the moment, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in cooperation with the Tajikistan embassy abroad, is working on drafting all the necessary documents. So the suspension, the debt servicing suspension mechanism could be arranged for, and everything necessary to be drafted and officially agreed upon.
Например, Кувейтский фонд развития, правительство Франции, Немецкий банк развития и Китайская Народная Республика посредством Эксимбанка выразили согласие на отсрочку обслуживания государственного долга на определенный период до конца 2020 года.
So I'll just name just a few institutions: the Kuwait Fund, the Government of France, the German Development Bank, the China's Exim Bank. They have already kindly provided their agreement to suspend the debt servicing for our part until the end of 2020.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, сегодняшнее виртуальное парламентское совещание по управлению государственным долгом в условиях пандемии COVID-19 является площадкой, где мы проводим диалог по вопросам политики и практики для управления госдолгом.
So, my dear colleagues, today's virtual
Chers
parliamentary
collègues, la réunion virtuelle parlementaire aujourd'hui qui porte sur la gestion de la dette dans le contexte de Covid-19 est une grande plateforme nécessaire pour mieux maîtriser les dossiers essentiels de gestion de dette.
Который нанес огромный ущерб их экономикам, представится возможно наиболее эффективно использовать финансирование Всемирного банка.
So we are very much hoping that the funding which is allocated by the World
Nous souhaitons que le financement proposé par la Banque mondiale donnera une possibilité aux pays qui ont été touchés négativement par ce virus et les différentes économies qui souffrent des pertes puissent saisir ces possibilités pour atténuer ces impacts significatifs.
Отзывается на глобальные вызовы и выделение банков финансирования в размере $160 миллиардов в США в течение 15 месяцев для смягчения последствий криза, несомненно, нормализирует мировую ситуацию.
So the 160
Les
billions
160 milliards de dollars qui ont été alloués par la Banque mondiale pour ces 15 prochains mois constituent un outil essentiel pour stabiliser la situation à l'échelle mondiale.
С долговым кризисом приостановление выплат по долгам
Уважаемый
является своевременной мерой.
коллега, фасилитатор пытается вас что-то сказать вам, извините.
Пожалуйста.
Yes, please. Erwe.
Yes, it would be good to conclude because we have a lot of questions after and not a lot of time after. So thank you very much. But if you can just like in 20 seconds conclude, dear colleague, it would be great. Thank you.
Таким образом, таджикская сторона выражает свое глубокое уважение и надеется на дальнейшее плодотворное сотрудничество.
So on behalf of Tajikistan, we would like to express our deepest appreciation and the extensive hope that the future collaboration will continue on.
Отметим, что в дальнейшем ожидаем от партнеров по развитию содействия всяческой поддержки в части реструктуризации совместных проектов и помощи в борьбе с пандемией COVID-19.
So we're looking forward to continue working with the development partners so that we can together restructure the future modes of support and we can successfully tackle the global impact by the pandemic of
Хотел
COVID-19.
выразить
Thank
признательность
you.
за организацию сегодняшней встречи. Желаю вам здоровья и успехов.
So my special appreciation to all of you, but specifically to the organizers of this meeting, and wish you all to be in good health and with good success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'll give now the floor to Njenga Njandi first for a question. Dear colleague.
Collègues, est-ce que vous êtes là?
Okay. He's not here, so I'll give the floor to
Je donne la parole
Alassani from Togo.
à M. Alassani du Togo.
Alassani from Togo.
M. Alassani du Togo, à vous la parole.
Your mic.
Veuillez allumer votre micro.
Okay. So I'll give the floor to Jean-Pierre Doukaga.
Je donne la parole à Jean-Pierre Doukaga du Gabon.
Bonjour à tous. Vous m'entendez, Hervé?
Oui, je vous entends très bien. Merci.
Merci. Bonjour à tous. Je suis donc Jean-Pierre Doukaga Kassa. Je suis député du Gabon, en même temps député du Parlement panafricain, membre de la Commission des finances. Je voudrais d'abord donc dire merci au réseau du Parlement FMI et Banque mondiale pour ces informations utiles qui sont données. Je voudrais également de prime abord vous informer de ce que nous, ici au Gabon, nous avons mis en place une commission d'enquête parlementaire pour s'assurer de bonne gestion administrative et financière de la pandémie, de la COVID-19. Mais ma question, elle est simple, elle est précise. Je voudrais savoir quels sont les moyens que la Banque mondiale et le Fonds monétaire ont mis en place pour une question de redevabilité.
Made available in order to address accountability. Also understand what sorts of controls the World Bank and the IMF have to ensure that the loans given to countries without concessionality are actually being used to combat the pandemic and also help the economies recover. That is my question.
Thank you very much for being so concise. So now I'll give the floor to three people who rose their hand. Alassani, you here?
Oui, oui.
Okay, so Alassani.
Oui. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Wait. Alassani, ask your question. Then after we'll have Alain Désiré, and then after we'll have Isa Marjo Jabil, who will ask his question. And I'll give the job of moderator to Liam because I have to go have a vote at the National Assembly. So it was a great pleasure. And Alassani, Alain Désiré, Marjo Jabil, you have the floor for a question. And thank you very much for being here. And unfortunately, I have to go. So all the best. And let's see each other quite soon. Bye.
Okay.
Alassani, you can go.
Okay.
And then after Alassani,
Oui.
Alain Désiré.
Okay, merci bien pour ce débat.
Thank you very much for this discussion. It's very rich and fruitful. Thank you. Once again, thank you for this very rich discussion. I have one, perhaps two questions. The first is, what are the conditions for African countries to be eligible for debt relief by the World Bank and the IMF in the context of the coronavirus pandemic? That's my first question. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. La deuxième question.
Second question. The World Bank and the IMF, what they're going to do to help African countries, in Togo in particular, because I am in the north of Togo. I am a member of Parliament, a member of the Finance Committee for Economic Development. And so the second question, again, is what the World Bank and IMF are planning on doing to help African countries, and particularly Togo, in order to continue to help their economies grow, since this is the way to best create jobs and to gain stability. So those are the two specific questions I wanted to ask to our partners from the World Bank and the IMF. And I look forward to your answer to the two questions. Thank you.
Right, I'm stepping back in to try and chair this final two questions, and then I'm going to hand back to our colleague from the World Bank, who's going to try and respond to what was a very broad and wide range of questions. Let me just hand the floor now to our next colleague who wants to ask a question. Over to you. Can I hear from Issa Madu?
Oui. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Good morning. I'm Samakdo Jabir, the chairman of the follow-up committee in Chad. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to ask a few questions, but also to make a few comments. You know that COVID-19 is a factor that has compounded the issue of debt servicing for African countries. And you know, with the fall of oil prices, the lower terms of exchange, and explosion of demographic issues and health issues, the deficit is getting deeper and deeper. And in this situation, you know that with or without COVID-19, we have to pay back this debt. The governments have to pay back the debt. But in this chain, in the whole process, what can the World Bank do to allow us to better manage the chain so that we can have good creditors and good debtors? And because there should be some kind of system that would allow the countries to diversify their sources of income. Because if you have debt relief or debt cancellation, well, we won't still be able to cover all the needs in our countries. So we need infrastructures, for instance. We need to enhance health facilities because this crisis has shed light on the imperative need to build these facilities to make them resilient, but in an innovative manner. So we also have to raise funds to help the private sector to boost the economy. And that's where I want to ask the question to the World Bank, so that we know exactly what the World Bank can do to help us face these needs, but also to enhance the private sector to stimulate the economy. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just now bring in Rasambani. Are you there? Final call, Rasambani.
Oui, bonjour. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Bonjour. Over to you. Floor is yours.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Vous m'entendez maintenant, hein?
Oui, oui.
Oui, en fait, Rasambani du Sénat.
Rasambani from Madagascar Senate. Thank you to all speakers for sharing this rich exchange of information.
Donc, j'ai deux questions.
I have two questions and a comment.
Maintenant, disons mondial plutôt par rapport
now about the global initiative to suspend the service on the debt. I wanted to make some kind of advocacy because we have an economic recession that all these beneficiary countries face. Maybe it would be efficient if we advocate for the cancellation of the debt, not just this debt service. So the first question I want to ask is, what would be the mechanism that the World Bank can use in order to have some kind of impact on local development in the beneficiary countries? And the second question, I had the opportunity to read the World Bank report on the mismanagement of bank funds in some countries. These funds actually go to tax havens. And my question is like, how can the bank stem this poor governance, this poor management of the funds so that there can be an effective diversification and a transparent management of World Bank funds in these beneficiary countries? Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Right, I'm going to bring in our colleagues now from World Bank. I'm going to go to Salah first because I think you've got to leave. But over to you. Have a crack at what was a very broad agenda.
Yes, thank you so much. And Aki is there to take on some of the other questions. I thought these were really excellent, so thank you.
C'était d'excellentes questions. Aki peut-être va répondre à l'autre. Le Togo a parlé de l'initiative de la suspension de la dette. Le Togo participe et donc va établir un espace fiscal de 5,5%. En fait, c'est la même chose pour le Tchad et Madagascar. Il y a un collègue qui va vous partager avec vous le site Internet, qui va vous montrer la liste des pays qui participent, quel espace, quels sont les créanciers, les débiteurs. Et tout ça est important pour la transparence. Je pense que la question que vous posez, qui est au cœur de cette problématique, c'est justement la question de s'assurer que ces fonds soient alloués pour sauver des vies, pour l'éducation, pour lutter contre la malnutrition et pour renforcer le travail dans le secteur informel. Alors, l'un de nos objectifs au niveau de la Banque mondiale et du G20, c'est de s'assurer justement que ces fonds sont judicieusement alloués. On a déjà établi un modèle et moi, ce que je vous demande, c'est que vos techniciens donnent les renseignements qu'ils font de façon transparente. Comme ça, tout le monde va en tirer parti. Comme ça, on va montrer aux citoyens comment les fonds sont utilisés et on va publier tout cela dans nos sites. Voilà un domaine qui est extrêmement important. En ce qui concerne les paradis fiscaux, nous avons un programme de recouvrement, en fait, justement pour s'occuper de ces vilaines dettes. Mais il y a d'autres méthodes qu'on utilise au niveau de la banque pour contrôler les recettes fiscales, pour s'assurer que les ressources sont utilisées de façon judicieuse, surtout dans ce qui concerne les programmes de la Banque mondiale. Il y a autre chose, il y a quelqu'un qui a parlé d'annulation de la dette. On en parle beaucoup. On va en discuter au G20 au mois d'octobre. Est-ce qu'il faut proroger la suspension? Et puis, on va essayer de voir pour quel pays il s'agit de problèmes de liquidité ou de problèmes de viabilité. Alors, s'il s'agit de problèmes de viabilité, il faut s'occuper de ces pays au cas par cas. Mais quand il s'agit de liquidité, on va voir si la prorogation peut leur être utile. Et on a déjà parlé hier quelque part dans une réunion. Cela va donner à ces pays un peu d'espace, 2 ou 3 ans. Et comme ça, ça leur donnera le temps de rembourser. Alors pour moi, ce qui est important, c'est qu'il faut attendre au niveau des marchés des capitaux, c'est l'élimination des barrières, l'utilisation de certaines méthodes. En fait, l'annulation d'une dette, c'est pas bon pour le pays. Et ça ne fait que différer votre accès aux capitaux. Il faut approfondir les marchés, apporter les réformes qu'il faut, impliquer le secteur privé justement pour la transformation économique. Ça, c'est un engagement clé au niveau de la Banque mondiale, la transformation de l'économie et des emplois, parce que, comme je l'ai déjà indiqué, c'est là où nous allons concentrer nos efforts. Ça va nous permettre de sortir de cette crise et de transformer l'économie. Comme ça, la création d'emplois se fera de façon beaucoup plus durable. Merci beaucoup pour cette occasion, j'apprécie beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Merci d'être concise. À qui? Est-ce que vous voulez conclure, si vous voulez? Jill a déjà répondu à la quasi-totalité des questions. Ce qui concerne la question gabonaise, les ressources qui sont disponibles pour assurer la redevabilité, il y a deux façons de procéder. Il y a d'abord des projets en matière de gouvernance. Il s'agit de projets financés par l'IDA qui soutiennent le renforcement des institutions, le monitoring des fonds. On le fait dans beaucoup de pays. Ça, c'est une méthode. L'autre méthode est celle de trouver des subventions pour apporter une assistance technique pour renforcer les systèmes fiduciaires dans les divers pays, le cadre des finances publiques. Donc, voilà une méthode pour assurer la redevabilité. Et puis, une autre question relative à la croissance du secteur privé. C'était la question tchadienne. J'y travaille en fait sur ce dossier il y a plusieurs années de cela. C'est une question difficile, surtout dans les pays comme le Tchad. Le Tchad est désavantagé à plusieurs égards, mais ce qui serait utile, c'est de démontrer que vous menez des efforts de réforme. Et ça va inciter le secteur privé et vous pouvez démontrer vos efforts de réforme, votre volonté de réforme par l'intermédiaire de certains indices doing business. Il y a une évaluation annuelle de la Banque mondiale en ce qui concerne les milieux d'affaires. Beaucoup de pays font beaucoup d'efforts pour mieux être classés dans ce classement des pays où on peut bien faire des efforts. Et au niveau de AIDA, il y a ce qu'on appelle la lucarne secteur privé. Et ça, c'est pour soutenir le secteur privé qui veut intervenir, par exemple, dans des pays comme le Tchad. Donc, des entreprises privées qui veulent intervenir, mais qui hésitent. Et donc, on peut exploiter cette lucarne. Et il y a d'autres méthodes qu'on pourrait utiliser pour inciter le secteur privé. Mais j'aimerais bien ajouter ce qu'on appelle les opérations de développement. Il s'agit de soutien au budget et il y a des actions préalables, des réformes politiques qui ont été engagées pour pouvoir bénéficier justement de ce genre de fonds. La plupart de ces actions préalables, c'est la levée de barrières qui entravent le secteur privé. Et là, on en voit beaucoup dans les pays en développement. Par exemple, comment enregistrer son entreprise, comment acquérir des terrains. Ça peut porter sur l'accès à l'électricité. Donc, il faut lever toutes ces barrières et appliquer la loi. Et en dernier lieu, pour ajouter à ce que Thieda a dit, à la question malgache, en fait, je connais bien le rapport dont vous parlez sur la mauvaise gestion des fonds de la Banque mondiale. En fait, ce n'est pas un rapport de la Banque mondiale, mais il y avait un économiste de la Banque mondiale qui a participé. On a un peu d'hésitation en ce qui concerne leur méthodologie dans ce rapport. En fait, les conclusions ont été assez hâtives à notre avis. Alors, nous avons publiquement dit cela. Et je voudrais quand même vous dire qu'on ne prend pas cette question à la légère. Et nous avons d'autres mécanismes au niveau de la banque. En fait, nous faisons tout pour endiguer cette mauvaise gestion des fonds. Voilà, à qui je vous remercie. Excusez tout le monde pour le retard, mais je pensais que c'était important de les entendre répondre à ces questions, nos collègues de la Banque mondiale. Je voudrais remercier tout le monde pour votre participation. Nous voulons en organiser autant que possible en ligne, donc notre réseau. Donc, si vous avez d'autres idées pour des séances que vous voulez qu'on organise, n'hésitez pas à me contacter et regardez le site que je viens de poster. On a une nouvelle plateforme numérique. On espère que ce sera une bonne plateforme pour échanger des connaissances, pour faire du réseautage, pour disséminer des idées de par le monde, non seulement pour s'entraider, mais pour échanger des idées, pour voir comment les organisations multilatérales doivent être impliquées dans ce monde en évolution. Donc, voilà des situations qu'il faut bien suivre. On n'a pas encore endigué cette crise, mais pour être vraiment en contact les uns avec les autres, nous devons partager des idées en matière de création d'emplois, de décarbonisation. Donc, il faut vraiment faire des efforts pour échanger des idées pour arriver à ces fins-là. Pour nous, une meilleure idée quelque part est une meilleure idée pour tout le monde. Et puis, aujourd'hui, on a beaucoup parlé de transparence et à terme, je dirais que notre rôle de député est de s'assurer que l'argent est judicieusement dépensé et que n'exploite pas la crise pour suspendre la démocratie, pour mettre fin à la transparence, parce que là, c'est un aspect politique dont nous devons tenir compte dans nos pays. En ce qui concerne la consolidation de la dette, il faut continuer ce débat et l'accélérer. Il importe que les gens le sachent. Même dans mon pays, au Royaume-Uni, les gens s'intéressent vivement au développement d'idées proposées par notre collègue malgache. Donc, non seulement pour la suspension du service de la dette, mais pour l'annulation de la dette. Et nous espérons que le gouvernement du G20 vont être à la hauteur de leur mission. Bon, il faut être réaliste quand même. Peut-être il y aura beaucoup de choses qui ne seront pas possibles avant les élections américaines, mais nous estimons que les actionnaires de la Banque mondiale et du Fonds monétaire international vont pouvoir faire avancer cette cause et que dans beaucoup de pays actionnaires, dont le mien, qu'il y aurait un intérêt politique appuyé pour s'assurer que le monde est bien protégé et donc on va faire avancer l'argument de l'annulation de la dette. Et, bon, ensuite, on a beaucoup parlé de fiscalité. Il faut changer les politiques fiscales d'ici 10 ans dans le monde. Et encore une fois, il nous faut respecter l'accord de Paris, mais essayer de voir également comment on peut rembourser ces dettes qui va monter. Et nous espérons que le Fonds monétaire et la Banque mondiale vont étudier ces dossiers de façon plus soutenue. Et en dernier lieu, il est critique que le secteur privé joue son rôle. Nous allons nous servir de nos réunions annuelles en octobre pour essayer de structurer des dialogues avec le secteur privé et surtout les investisseurs, des organisations comme la responsabilité sur l'investissement. Ils ont quelque chose comme 100 000 milliards de dollars de disponibles. Et donc, on peut les inciter à avoir des projets de décarbonisation, de croissance. Cela va faire avancer notre cause beaucoup plus rapidement, notre cause de réduction de la pauvreté, et cela dans nos vies. Merci beaucoup d'avoir participé à cette réunion, d'avoir participé à la réussite. Et si vous avez des remarques à faire publier, n'hésitez pas de nous contacter et nous espérons publier ou lancer la plateforme numérique qui pourra nous permettre de réseauter. Merci beaucoup. Merci à tous les collègues qui étaient parmi nous. Merci à l'équipe technique et merci aux agents de liaison au niveau du réseau des parlementaires, ceux qui ont rendu cet après-midi possible. Merci tout le monde. Merci Léon. Voilà. Au revoir.